really honored to have a guest for our Lunch and Learn. Linda Lopez was generous enough to spend an hour with us today, and I know she has just started her semester, so I know she's busy, so it's extra special, wonderful that she's doing this for us. We will get all into the history of Linda's time at the Clay Studio and her other, how she's built her artistic life and her amazing artwork. I also want to just give my normal thanks to all of you for joining us, and reminder that put my PBS hat on and say, we're offering you this free programming as a way to make sure that our community stays connected and to offer you something valuable. So if you feel able to make a donation to the Clay Studio, that would be lovely. In the chat, I put a few links. The first link is just a regular donation link. The second one is for the mud ball, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but that's on September 17th. It's coming right up. You can purchase a ticket. If you do that, you will get a very cool box of goodies in the mail, which includes some cups, maybe even a cup by Jennifer Martin if you're lucky, some cocktails, and some other fun things. So if you would like to buy a ticket, which is a donation, and get that fun box. And then finally, the mud ball auction is being elevated by a really wonderful, generous gift by Linda of just an amazing work of art that we're going to see a little bit later when we talk about her work specifically, and that you'll get to bid on as part of the mud ball. Okay, so those are my PSAs. And I'm going to ask Linda to introduce herself to you and to talk a little bit about her background and how she ended up coming to the Clay Studio. And I think we talked about this was 10 years ago. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I'm Linda Lopez. I'm currently work and reside in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I actually moved to Arkansas from Philadelphia after my time there. So I am in my home because I do work at the university. You know, I do have a small office space there. And I have a studio here at my home, which is currently under construction, well, renovation. So I'm getting a sink. So I've spent, since I got here, gosh, in 2012, I haven't had a sink in the studio, so I just use buckets of water. And so I'm so excited to finally have running water.
Yay.
And a bathroom. So I guess that's my excitement for today, as the electrician is here. So, so I guess kind of just where I started, how I got to the Clay Studio. I went to grad school at University of Colorado at Boulder. I was there from 2007 to 2010. And I applied for everything. I was like that, had the opportunity and was able and willing to move anywhere for just any opportunity I could get. So I just remember, you know, my last semester of grad school, just kind of frantically filling out every application as possible, and knowing that I was going to have to live a little bit of a transient lifestyle for a while to figure out, you know, how to be an artist. What does it mean to be an artist? So I'm originally from California. So, you know, I had moved to Boulder, and then I got accepted to the Clay Studio. And I just remember being like, I was like, I did it. This is the next step. I am so pumped. Well, first of all, I couldn't believe it. And I was like, did they get the right person? Did the applications get mixed up? Maybe I got the wrong email. Like, you know, I just was seriously like really surprised.
Well, that you should be surprised, but it's fun to hear.
Yeah, I was super excited. And at the time, my partner, who is my husband now, Matthew McConnell, he graduated a year ahead of me. We met in grad school, and he went off to New Zealand. So as soon as I graduated, I kind of packed up a storage unit and, you know, zipped off to New Zealand for the summer, and then came back to Philadelphia. The funny thing about it is that I didn't have a car in grad school. I just had a bicycle and a scooter. And you know, my Matthew was in New Zealand. He's like, you should just take my truck to Philly, like pack it up, drive to Philly. And I'm like, great, but I don't know how to drive a stick. So I literally learned the day before I drove to Philly how to drive. Yeah. So I'm like going on the interstate and I'm thinking like, I need to make the least amount of stops as possible. Cause once you're going, like it's easy, right? But it's getting into first gear from being parked is like horrifying because you're
God
like
forbid you're on
stalling
a
and
hill.
yeah. So I basically learned how to drive stick in Philadelphia, which was
Well,
interesting.
that's a major accomplishment, I would have to say. And you know what, Linda, because I always say these are very casual, this got so casual that I haven't actually read your bio to everyone yet. So I'm just going to
Oh,
have you pause. I apologize. That's my fault. Um, so everyone, Linda Nguyen Lopez is first generation American ceramic artist of Vietnamese and Mexican descent. Her abstract works explore the poetic potential of the everyday by imagining and articulating a vast emotional range embedded in the mundane objects that surround us. Lopez received a BFA, I forgot to change it, you earned a BFA from California State University of Chico and an MFA from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Her works have been exhibited in Italy, New Zealand, England, and throughout the United States, including the Craft and Folk Art Museum, Los Angeles, Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, Bentonville, Long Beach Museum of Art, Long Beach, the Whole New York, Fisher Parish, Brooklyn, Jane Hartsook Gallery at Greenwich House Pottery, New York Museum of Art and Design. She has been an artist in residence at the Clay Studio, Art G. Foundation, Greta Rome, Greenwich House Pottery, and is represented by the Mindy Solomon Gallery. So my apologies for not doing that a few minutes ago, but there we go. We got a little interlude. So we've got you in Philadelphia. You know how to drive the stick.
yeah.
And yeah, you pulled into the parking lot at the Clay Studio, and what happened next?
Uh, everybody was so welcoming. It was an amazing kind of like, how can I help you? Can I carry something up for you? And I'm like, whatever, why is everybody so nice? And I really lucked out with really amazing roommates too, that worked at Tyler. They teach at Tyler. So I felt like I just fell into this artist community in Philadelphia, like really easily. I mean, it was almost unbelievable how the transition was kind of seamless. I lived in South Philly. I parked the truck and I tried to never drive it because I just didn't know how, really wasn't great at it. And I rode my bike. But what was amazing was like the instant community that was like built between the residents and basically everybody affiliated with the Clay Studio and just the arts community in Philadelphia in general. I just feel like had really open arms and was so open that I was kind of like, it just felt so dreamy. It was one of those moments that you're just like, wow, this community is amazing, that they are just accepting everyone. So, I moved into upstairs, and actually, can I share my screen? I have a couple images, I think, of my studio.
Yeah, hold on one sec. Let me make you a co-host.
Okay.
Should have done that. Okay, you're good.
I do have a moment of joy that happened that I'm still kind of floating on, real quick. Now that you read my bio, I was like, oh yeah, the Smithsonian has has acquired, definitely not finally. I'm very excited. Well, why I say finally is because they were reviewing the piece for months, and I'm sitting on the edge thinking like, just tell me no already, it's okay. Like, but yeah, so it is official and I'm really excited.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah,
Congratulations. It does
thank
take a
you.
long time to go through those processes at museums.
Yeah, it was months. So here's my work if you're not familiar with it. These are what I call dust furries, which I can talk about, why I call them dust furries in a little bit. But these ones are made out of porcelain, colored porcelain, a cone 6 commercial colored porcelain. Oh, how do I change slides? Here we go. I can come back to these, but I just wanted to, since I'm talking about the Clay Studio, I figured I'd come here to the amazing community that I met. There was a, we were on the fourth floor, and I had the studio in the back right corner there behind us, and there was a leak in one of the skylights, and it was just amazing that I just kind of ran around and I was like, "There's a leak," and we kind of came together and tried to find a bunch of buckets, and we're like soaking wet. But it was really nice that everyone was like, "Yes, let's get the leak taken care of." It was evening and there wasn't many people around, but Peter
Did
Morgan in his studio.
Is that Wynn Bauer with you on the leak day? Who else is in there?
Yeah, Lily Zuckerman was there. She was there as I think she was working in Giselle's space. Giselle was away. Mallory and Kim.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like I've met some amazing lifelong friends there at the Clay Studio, which was, you know, only being there for 2 years. I feel like I met like it was instant, and they were amazing. And we still keep in touch. Um, the furry actually started at the Clay Studio, the clay ones, anyways. So I started making them in grad school, but they were made out of balloons, like latex clown balloons that I filled with sand and then attached them to these foam forms. Um, so when I was at the Clay Studio, I did make a couple of those for some shows, but I was like, wait a minute, I'm at the Clay Studio. I should make these out of clay. So this was actually the first ones I'd ever made. The one on the left didn't really survive. It kind of cracked as I was trying to figure it out. And I remember, as I was making these, the top, like trying to figure out the hair, I call it the hairline, but the top part of the furry. Um, and I just remember like sitting there and trying to put it together and then taking it apart and really trying to figure out how to make that like a really kind of natural growth from the top. Um, and Michael Fujita, who was a resident there at the time, was walking by, and he stopped to take a peek. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just really trying to figure this out. So actually, Michael Fujita figured out how to finish the top for me. So, like that community was just amazing to have around. I think coming out of grad school, like when you're thinking about graduating and starting a studio or a residency, the unknown is so large that walking into a community like that was, it was amazing. I mean, it was almost like a grad community where you have these instant friends and you have the support, you have people to help you with the material. Um, but you don't have the pressure of academia, in classes, and so it was kind of a really great launching pad to figure out how to maneuver, uh, in a professional studio practice, but still having that community base. So you can actually see under the table there, those were the balloon ones, the orange and the white
Oh,
ones. You can see the tip of that there is hot glued together to hold the sand in it. Let's see. This was the show that I ended up having at the end of my time at the Clay Studio, um, where I was still very much working in like mixed media and trying to figure out, how to still work in clay. And there's only one tiny little dust furry in here, which is on that small little clay lump on the ground on top of the book. It's a little tiny white looking one there. Here's another image of these chains. I actually think I made most of this show when I had moved back. My show wasn't scheduled until after I had left the Clay Studio, so I actually came back for my exhibition.
hmm.
So I only stayed for 2 years because I met my my husband was in Arkansas, my partner at the time, sorry. And he was teaching at the university and had asked for me to come out. So I was like, yeah, sure. And I was devastated. I was like, man, I could stay for 5 years. Like, I really love the community. I love the space. I loved all my friends, uh, but I thought, this is my partner. I need to be supportive, and I'm going to do it. So I came out. Um, and I really do miss Philly. I felt like it was a town that um, you can be connected with the clay community on so many different levels, not just the residents. I felt like the seamlessness between the residents and the students and the work exchange for me on my end, like, was amazing to have. Um, I met some really great students because I was able to teach some hand building classes there. I've I'm still friends with some of the work study, which is really great. Um, and then also like being connected within kind of the arts community there, being plugged in and being able to meet people. I just loved all of the artist run spaces that were happening. It just felt like a really friendly arts community that I don't know if I would have received if I had moved anywhere else. There was just so much support and excitement, I think, and energy from all of those, all of those outlets that I think was just like readily available there. So the desk. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying yes. That's so nice to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, I miss
Healthy.
it. I miss the food.
Oh
I
yeah.
miss the city. I miss being able to walk around the city and being able to ride my bike to places. I love country life. This is great. But I do miss those moments. I was really inspired actually, just like on my walks and my bike rides from South Philly to the clay studio. I got really inspired by detritus and everything kind of like around me. I think in grad school, my work, the dust furry started from like being inspired by a domestic space. That having that more time like outside within the city streets, I think really kind of fueled my practice. Um, and so I think for me, like having that transition really, one, like opened up a new way of thinking about the world, and thinking about like what my work is about, and also got me back into clay. So the dust furry started with this idea of the relationship between like dust and objects. So I started to think about the empathy of objects and kind of animating the inanimate in grad school and thinking about the domestic objects around us. Like, how does this chair feel about me sitting on it? Does it miss having people on it, or would it rather not have people on it? And the interactions between like object and objects, like do the books on the bookshelf love being next to each other, or do they prefer to be next to other books? They prefer to be on the coffee table. So just kind of starting to like think about like how objects live and what they feel, the histories that they've experienced. Um, and so for me, I started to think about the relationship between dust and objects. Do objects see dust as a nuisance, or a sign of uncleanliness, or a sign of the time passing, or does it see it as a shield or a blanket to the world? Um, so when I started to think about dust, I thought, well, like, how can I make dust in the studio? And so I was like, well, like, I had one of those microfiber dusters, like on pinned up to my wall. Yeah, those like little furry fingery ones. Um, and so I decided that I wanted to try to mimic that surface and call that dust. So that's how I started using the kind of latex balloons. Um, it actually started, I went to I didn't have those readily available. So what I tested was I went and just bought a box of nitrile gloves and cut all the fingers off of it and started that way. So the first one actually ended up with like larger kind of tubes. But then I thought the clown balloons, animal balloons would work perfect, and it kind of did. So that's kind of where this kind of texture comes from, and I refer to it as like dust, or dust furry. So kind of this animate piece of dust. So I started making the dust while I was at the clay studio, and then it's kind of progressed into kind of a technical challenge with clay and trying to figure out how to make the color, make the actual clay body, the colored surface, and trying to beautify something that we see as kind of, not necessarily something wanted. Nobody wants a bunch of dust in their house. But it does hold a lot of history and a lot of time. I think dust is actually really beautiful because it does collect all of these tiny little pieces of pigment of your skin, of, pet fur. It's actually like a little time capsule in a way. It captures, I have some dust that have fingernail clippings in it. When I had a kid, I started using, like, I call those cutouts, like the one on the blue-green one with the red lobster cutouts, because I think about like all the clippings that she leaves behind as she's like doing her craft time. So for me, like when I think about my work, I start to think about each object as being kind of its own identity or character. So these are what I call nubbies, which I think of like silhouettes of objects kind of coming to life. These are plants that I think of as plants, but that are ones that are windowsills. So the one thing that I really loved in Philadelphia is I had one window in my room, and which had a plant in front of it. And if it were super bright outside, the light would just eat the plant, where like the leaves would get deformed. It would just be kind of like the light would be so bright, it would be shining through the negative spaces of the plant, that it almost deformed the plant itself and changed it into something else. So for me, this idea of like an alternative reality that I'm creating is basically just an interpretation of the world around me, but through kind of like what I like to call like Linda vision. It's like this weird animate world. Um, this is the largest desk furry to date that I've made, and it's all clay, and it's like 4.5 feet tall, I think.
So beautiful.
Um, and then this here is so this is when I start to think of the objects as characters. They also live within these like assemblaged kind of little still lifes that I like to create, where the titles will give you a little bit of an idea of kind of the narrative that is captured, and textiles start to kind of come into play. I think that love for kind of like mixed media and using whatever I need to use is still in me, and I think that has been kind of something that's been embedded in my practice. I mean, since undergrad, my all of my kind of clay education has been very much from a sculptural perspective that allows a lot of breathing room to use whatever materials you need. Clay is a material to be used to express, and it's okay to use other things. And um, I do love nerding out about clay and trying to figure it out. I love this like technical kind of approach of trying to figure out the clay body and trying to, color ombre the clay perfectly and finding the perfect steps. But sometimes I just need other materials to step in to do things that the clay can't do. Um, and still play, I've always kind of played with 2D and 3D. So using drawings to act as kind of these like windows or portals into like another kind of flat universe.
Can you talk about that last one? Just it almost looks like you are. Um, is it going through the clay form? The fabric is like, I don't know. Is it a printer? Is it being transformed as it goes through the slot? Like what is happening there? It's so interesting.
So I had this exhibition. I think it was called Ghost Hands or Ghosts. I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head. But it was a show that I basically based off of these rugs that I had commissioned, or actually, it was like more of like a collaborative with this group called XYZ Cooperative. Um, so the rugs were made by these weavers in Oaxaca, Mexico. And I had the weavers, I gave them basically just like the dimensions of like what I needed the rugs to be. And then I told them kind of like a color palette, but I just said like, no, the background needs to be this like kind of tannish colored. Um, and so basically, and then I gave them freedom to kind of use they call them constellations, like the patterns on the rugs, um, to use their constellations just kind of as uh, the background, but actually they removed the background. So if you go to XYZ Cooperative, you can see the actual traditional weavings that the Oaxacan weavers would do. But I asked them to remove that background and just use the floating constellations. One, just visually, they're super busy, very bright and vibrant. They're actually really, really beautiful. Um, but for me, it was this relationship that I had with kind of this history and background that I don't really know. So my father is a Mexican immigrant, um, and most of my family lives in Mexico. Um, and I don't know them very well. I don't speak Spanish. I would see my grandparents maybe every other summer, maybe until I was about 10, and then it kind of fizzled. Um, and then, so really, even talking to my father is very broken English still. I mean, he still lives in California, and he can basically be okay, like speaking Spanish in California, with the job that he has. So for me, like the ghost hands was kind of a dual play on like trying to understand like what my narrative is and using the rug as a symbol of understanding my history. So kind of the language and the constellations being floating and kind of this unknownness, and not being grounded in the history, but also having the fringe being not finished. So some of the other rugs, you'll see in my other works, the actual warp is really just kind of like really long. Just the idea of like that the rug is still being woven and that history is still being made. So I'm still thinking about the past that I don't know, but also thinking like I'm still building the future and building this history. Um, Working with textiles came from this idea of like the Turkish rug and how a Turkish rug is passed down from family member to family member, and that history. So kind of going back to the idea of like being empathetic with objects, that history of like every person that holds that rug will forever impact that rug and forever impact the future members of that family that it gets handed down to.
Mm.
And so that's kind of like where my relationship with the rug came from, and just thinking about like, I don't have any family heirlooms that are passed down from family member to family member because my dad came here with just his clothes, and my mother did too, during the Vietnam War. So I don't have those things that tell me a little, like give me little hints of like my past family members, or I don't have those like little threads of history that I feel like I'm now just trying to figure out. I think after having a child, for me, it was like that all of a sudden that importance came to me. Like, how do I tell her about our family and the trajectory of kind of, my parents coming here to the US?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it seems like you're so well, the object is such a great metaphor for all those things. And the way you talk about objects having empathy and kind of being activated, I like that the ceramic thing, it feels like it's doing something to the rug. It's like, they're definitely in conversation and some action is happening that we can't quite understand because we're not objects. So there's that mystery too of like, what is that ceramic thing doing to the rug? But something is definitely going on.
It's a process. I see it as like processing, yeah, and like trying to kind of move it through. And for me, it feels like I'm very much like trying to process and like figure this out. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. Uh,
There's your clay studio time.
there's the clay studio times.
So we talked yesterday, and I warned you that I was going to ask what the best thing and the worst thing about the clay studio residency would be, and you got a big smile on your face when I said that.
Yeah, I would, I don't, when I think about it, I'm just thinking about like hauling my bike like up those stairs, like 4 flights of stairs. Like every day I just was like, I should just lock it up out here, like outside. But I was like, I don't want to come back to a missing tire. Like, so I would like just carry it and just lug it up the 4 flights of stairs. Um, and for me, like, it was like the worst thing, but also like the best thing. Cause I feel like I probably gained, like, I was like, as you're doing it, you're like, yes, I'm getting stronger every day, but because I worked in Old City, like I just feel like everything kind of I might turn this off because I don't know if there's really anything else in here.
Sure.
So I feel like my I worked in Old City. I worked at the Jewish Museum, and so I would ride my bike to work and then ride it to the clay studio and lug it up the stairs every day. I mean, I was there, 6 or 7 days a week, because I was, working almost full time. But because it was so close, it was just so convenient and so perfect to just kind of like pop in, get some work done. Um, but yeah, every day I would just like lug up my really heavy bike. It wasn't a road bike. It was like some sort of like cruiser bike that was like a tank. And I think that was probably the worst part, but honestly, it wasn't even that bad because I feel like I probably gained a little bit of muscle doing that.
Yeah, and maybe some of those muscles are still in there.
Yeah.
That's a good.
10 years later.
That's a good worst thing. That's fine.
Yeah.
um, so I wanted to show people quickly we have a short twirly video of your piece that you donated for the mud ball. And so maybe while I'm showing this, you can just talk a little bit about this particular one and what it means to you and how these are evolving right now.
Yeah. So this came from a body of work that, you know, I've been making the furries, and they seem to be kind of this like have become a very technical challenge, whether that's making them out of porcelain, colored clay, and making them larger. So this one came from a body of work where I pushed myself to figure out like, okay, how can I develop this furry? What is the next step? So I thought, well, like, I wonder if I could just blow it up, like the fur on the piece. Um, are all very, just like rolled coils. But I just thought, like, if I could just, look under a microscope and make it huge. So I went and made some dies on an extruder. I worked with our technology lab here, which was great. And I made a bunch of different tube dies. And basically, this was one of the tube dies that I had made. So I made a handful of these kind of larger pieces, where each one of these, I think somebody asked if these were hollow, but yeah, each one of these is just like a tube that I had closed off and then added to a form underneath. So this was an amazing kind of first kind of approach to making these larger, which I had been meaning to go back to do again because I really love working with the large tubes. They're so funny to see because they are normally seen as just kind of this small little fluffy thing, but then as soon as you make it on a grander scale, they almost become a little bit funny, which I love. They almost become a little bit more kind of animate and like relatable because of the scale. They become like, actually like, yeah, you could be a giant piece of dust sitting next to me at a table. So yeah, that's kind of where that comes from, is like this approach of like just trying to figure out how to make them bigger. And then this is actually a low fire clay body, an earthenware with this like now discontinued German I call it asphalt, but it's like this like almost like a metallic or graphite gray glaze on it.
Oh, I wonder if that's the same. Andrea Marquis was telling me about a couple of years ago about a glaze that was, I think, this color that was getting discontinued as well. So,
oh, it's so sad. It's
yeah,
such a
so
good
it
glaze.
means everyone that this is something that is now going to be unmatchable. So anyone who wants this in their home, gotta get it now.
Yeah, I know. I should email that German company, tell them to bring it back.
I'm so interested in the idea of dust and the empathy of objects. Being a decorative arts and craft historian, I mean, that's the whole reason why I kind of moved from being a student of history to one of art history, decorative arts history, because I look at a chair from the 19th century and I think, who sat on that chair? What clothing were they wearing that made them
Yeah.
why did the chair look like that? Were you wearing a hoop skirt? What kind of posture did you need? So there's so many silent stories and objects, and the idea that you're making your own objects and actually thinking about them in an animated way, I love, because I mean, I'm sort of also a child of magical thinking, I guess. I'm always imagining the same idea about what the objects are thinking. I think we probably all used to worry that our dolls were lonely, maybe, which one we're going to take on the road trip. I'm not sure I ever got over that concern. So I'm glad I'm
Maybe
not.
my rocks, my pet rocks.
Yes, whatever it was that held your imagination, right? It's like, well, if I think about this thing all the time, what is it thinking about?
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I think well, and it's like there is a theory like called sympathetic magic where these objects like do kind of exist in that realm, and there are a lot of cultures that believe that these objects kind of like embody an actual, spirit in a way, which I think is really beautiful, and I hope that when I'm making my objects, I hope they can exude kind of like some sort of spirit.
mhm.
And I think for me, it's that, like the dust furries have become so, like kind of beautiful and pretty, but I also hope they have like this like positive energy that kind of is, exuded through them.
Yeah, and the idea that more empathy is going to make our world better, and that it is something that I think putting that vibe out into the world is, I believe, part of why people are pursuing making art, why we love to show art, why we interact with it, why people who are not artists but just viewers really gain value, because we're learning about each other, and that always builds empathy. And
Mhm.
so imbuing that into the work is just so important, and I certainly get that positive vibe from it. Um, I was thinking, I mean, there's just so many great things about dust. I'm sure that it sounds like you've really also done some really interesting research, that when you're talking about dust being beautiful and that it is like a time capsule, because is it 80% skin? Is that right?
I think so. It's really high. It's kind of,
It really is like
yeah.
you could test the DNA of the dust and probably find out all kinds of things about different people. Um, I also think about his Dark Materials. Have you read that Philip Pullman book?
Mm-mm.
That's the British name for it. The Amber Spyglass. I can't remember the American name of the novel, but it's all about dark material dust as like
Oh, cool.
the um, animating force of the universe, that it kind of underlies everything. So anyway, those are and of course I have a magnet on my refrigerator that says dust is a protective covering.
Oh,
So
you do. Oh my, please send me a picture of that. I
okay.
would love to see that. We just watched gosh, I can't remember what the TV series was, but it talked about dust and how like it basically travels like all the way, like thousands and thousands of miles, like from the Sahara Desert, like all the way to like, I can't remember where it was, like South America or something. But anyways, it was kind of amazing to see kind of the like how like not only like is weather impacted, but just like how far it can move and yeah, anyways.
Yeah, that's so great. Um, I love talking about this stuff. I'm gonna look at our chat to see if anyone has questions for us for a moment. Let's see. Raymond put some more links in. Thanks, Raymond. And asked if the tubes are hollow. You already answered that. So they're specially made extruder dies, is what you were saying, right?
Yeah, I just picked out diameters and they just uh cut them for me. Yeah.
And it's 18 inches tall. And what is the form underneath? Somebody asks. So is it a ceramic kind of strata stratum underneath
Hmm.
there?
Yeah, it's just a coil pinched. I love to coil pinch. That's I kind of laugh that like everything I make is out of a coil. But yeah, so I just basically just coil pinch the form and then let that set up and then add the parts to it.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason why
Um,
people have been making coils for millennia, right?
right.
um, Cal B says dust as bling. Yeah, we like that.
Hmm.
Um, somebody says, Michelle says she can see dusting as in a new light. Seems
Yay.
we're all having a more of a dust turn, spending more time with our domestic objects. That's true. Yeah, we're all kind of
Yeah.
staring at our things more than normal. Raymond was asking more about the Smithsonian piece. Do you know, I guess you probably don't have an image of which one, is
I
it one
think
of
I
the
do. Let me
series?
see if I can pull it up really quick. It is. It's probably on my website, Jen, if you want to just
Oh, sure, I can
grab
get
my
my,
website really quick. It's
sure.
the blue, it's like a blue and purple ombre dust furry. Um,
I do, I have your thing open, so I can just go right in there.
cool.
Blue and gray.
blue and purple, I think. It might be on my website.
Oh, I'm on Mindy's mom's. Hold on one sec. Let me go over
Okay.
yours. Um, so, and I know while I'm looking this up, I always forget to write Linda Lopez ceramic artist, and I come up with the actress.
J-Lo's sister, her name is Linda Lopez.
Oh, that's
And
J-Lo's sister? Okay. I never like
yeah.
clicked on it. I just saw her face.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a good
I
person to
think there's
share.
a governor somewhere, like in Arizona. That's a Linda. There's a lot of Linda Lopez's in the world.
That's a good name. There are 5 Jennifer's Willings in the United States, according to Facebook,
Oh.
but I don't
Uh,
know any of them. Can
let's
you see
see.
this?
Maybe scroll down. Oh, maybe it's not on there. Oh, rats.
No,
Okay.
that's okay. I mean, we have a
Yep.
sense. It's one of the more it's a colorful kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. It goes from like a purple to purple at the top, and then it turns to like a blue at the bottom, and then the rocks are purple.
Well, it is a fascinating idea. I mean, if you don't mind sharing how that process got started, and did you get to talk to the acquisition committee, or did they just sort of brought? I mean, I've been on the other end of it at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, but it might be interesting to hear how an artist perceives that kind of process of acquisition approval. It's so strange.
The funny thing is I did nothing. It was very hands off for me on my end. Because I work with Mindy and I also work with David B. Smith in Denver. Um, a lot of, I think so. Actually, this is relates to the clay studio. While I was there, the first desk furries I made, I was in a group show at Cross Mackenzie, which was in DC. And I had some, which is now closed. I was in a group show. I sent some pieces there while I was at the clay studio. I think it was the second year. And the show happened, and I think Michael Fujita was in the show. There was a couple of us from maybe Melissa Mitty was in the show. So there was a handful of us that were in the show. And when the show came down, she asked, like, can I just keep these in my back room? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, sure, keep them, like whatever. I think I'm learning. I'm trying to figure things out, like how to navigate. I didn't realize like what the benefits were to having work in the back room of a gallery. I wasn't necessarily represented by her, but the work was there. People could see it. So Mindy just happened to be in DC. She went to the gallery and she saw the work in the back room, and she called me and was like, I love these furry thingies that you're doing. Like, let's talk. And that's when the relationship happened. So, we kind of worked with each other for about a year before, we kind of like, I guess we're official. um, and, um, and so basically, Mindy and now David do a lot of that kind of footwork for me. They take me to art fairs, which is really great. I wasn't sure, in grad school, it felt like such a, kind of like a sellout moment to go to art fairs or something. But it was actually, it's been amazing. The exposure is fantastic. And one of the curators at the Smithsonian had seen the work at one of the art fairs, and then reached out to David and Mindy to work out like what works were available. So for me, I was just told that it was being considered, and I just sat on the edge of my seat for months. So I didn't do anything. I just, sent the work in for review, and then just waited for news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, congratulations again, because it's rare because the museums are filling up with stuff. The storerooms are full, and there's a lot stricter limits on what's accepted. So that's a really wonderful thing for the nation, because now you're part of a national collection.
Yeah, I'm super pumped about it. And I'm so grateful for Mindy and David being able to like get that worked out for me.
Yeah. Well, and thanks for sharing some of that process about galleries, because I think that's really important for young artists to kind of understand how that works. And then it's really about being open to connections and the understanding the relationship that you need to have, the artist's responsibilities and the gallery's responsibilities, and how both sides are important. That's really great. I could talk more about that, but I want to answer people's questions, so we'll go back over
Okay.
here to Rosario says, does history of the object add meaning to the object? I'm not sure. Rosario, do you want to ask us that question in person? If you want to take yourself off mute, explain a little more.
Yeah, I was just thinking that a lot of objects have meaning because history gives them meaning. You know,
Right.
like you read the Hair with Amber Eyes and you've got the Netsky collection that adds a meaning throughout the history. And in that history, you get the story of what's happening in that time period and what's happened to this family. So it's just an added layer of meaning. And so I find that the dust thing is very appealing because it does add a layer of a person's life, right? It's your life within the object. But, and I know she's considering the idea of dust, and I think that's a wonderful idea, but I wasn't sure if when she's creating the pieces, I don't know, is it the hope that that these objects become sort of a history of her moment in life in this time, or are they just objects that with time that people who buy them give them the meaning? So I don't know. I'm kind of trying to
No,
formulate it myself.
yeah, I mean, I think I'm still trying to understand that too. I mean, just in a sense, like, you know, I love like when people get the dust furries, I see it as like this shipping of like sending this thing to live with somebody in a whole new environment, in a whole new, you know, surrounding, like it's going to have a whole new bunch of friends. So for me, like thinking about like that aspect of it and like thinking about like this new life that it's going to carry, like it's going to carry what it has lived with me in the short period of like creation and being made and sitting in my studio and the, you know, interactions I've had with it. But it's actually, it's almost like I'm sending a small, you know, a little being out into the world to live. So what I really love is seeing images of the work, like, and where it kind of like now resides. And I like to think about it and like see, like, you know, like what is it interacting with? You know, does it get sunlight? Is it on a shelf? Like, um, I think recently I sent a piece off and I was like, yeah, and if you want to wash it, just give it a soothing bath in the sink because it's ceramic. So you can just rinse it off. So, you know, they were like, oh my gosh, I love that you said you give it a bath. And I'm like, yeah, you know, you could just rinse that thing off if it gets dusty. You know, so I do like to think of them as kind of these like tiny little creatures that are like living in the world. But I do think of it as like this, for me, like when I first started making these, they were actually parts to other pieces. They were characters within these narratives that I was trying to capture. So for me, they did already play a role in kind of these larger narratives and ideas. And then when I started to break them up, you know, well, one, because that's what people wanted to purchase that small thing and live with that thing. And I had a hard time like trying to figure out like, is that the right thing to do? Like, is it okay to split a piece apart and take this character out? So I thought, well, if I could take one character out, can I take all the characters out? And then they can be these little beings in the world. Because they still are these things to me. It still is this kind of ball of dust. And you know, the lump is still like this pile of lump. There's a film called The Science of Sleep that I think portrays like a really kind of beautiful threshold of like, you know, being asleep and being awake and not knowing, you know, which one is the real one. And I love that idea that these objects can live in reality in this world that we live in, but you can have this moment of escape to this kind of fictional kind of narrative or moment or Linda vision within the real world that you live in. I like to think of that thing of like when you're on, you know, if you're sleeping and you hear your phone ringing and you think you're dreaming it, but then you wake up and your phone is actually ringing, that it's that thing that can float between the two worlds. Like to me, like that is like Like, I love that. Like when you can just almost be tricked into like another kind of universe. Yeah, I don't know if that answered, Rosario. I'm not sure if that
Yeah,
answered
no,
your
no,
question.
no. That's interesting. That's
Yeah,
interesting. 'Cause I'm always trying to figure out, when you make an object, how do you take it beyond just being an object without a
yeah,
story or without a meaning, you know? And
yeah.
how do you convey that to other people when they see it? Do they, so how do you get them to see it beyond just an object?
Right, right.
Yeah.
I totally, yeah, I can see that kind of hurdle and trying to figure it out. But I feel like, I don't know. I mean, this might be just be like an optimistic part of me, but like thinking like if you just like can pour your energy into this thing, like it does have this life. And then, just trying to animate them too in some way without it being like too animate for me because I work in abstraction. Like I do need to have like a little bit of that like think like it's gonna scuttle away or move away. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's that, there is also a level of just like visceral attraction to the object. So that's just another layer of story. So the viewer kind of looks at it and loves it because it's like, oh, that's so cute, or it looks sad. It looks, they add their own sort of gut reaction to the thing, and then that's how you can kind of build the story for yourself.
Hmm.
But I loved it. It's so much more meaningful when we can hear from your own from the artist's mouth the ways that you think about them and the stories of yourself that you're putting onto things, which is just beautiful. I thank you. Thanks, Rosario. That was really thoughtful. Someone asked about, where was I? Judy Tavel asked about your color choices, and how you
Um,
come to those color choices.
like currently it's more of like just a technical kind of approach of trying to figure out like what line blends I can build. Like honestly, like I'm just trying to like, okay, like let's try this line blend and just trying to figure out like the balance of color, saturation, value and hue and mixing colors. A lot of Albers color theory kind of plays in. Um, but when it first started, it was basically like I was trying to, my color palette has always been kind of captured through like the domestic space. Sorry, I think my dog might start barking. So if she does, I'm just gonna mute really quick. The mailman or delivery man is here. She's that very typical dog that barks at the mailman. Uh, so I've been, it was very, very based off of like the domestic space, and thinking about like the objects that are around me. And then it kind of started to shift and thinking about like colors through light, and thinking about like, what time of day is it in these scenarios, or in these narratives that I'm creating? Is it dusk or is it sunrise? Is it the middle of the day? Because we have all these windows that don't have blinds on them, and it like depending on the weather, depending on the time, like totally changes the mood and the way that you perceive your space, the way that you perceive the objects around you, the way you navigate your space. So for me, like when I think about those larger assemblages, I start to think about the way that like what tone do I want to set for this narrative, is where those colors come from when I have the multiple characters kind of in a scene. But when it comes down to the actual for dust furries, the porcelain ones right now, it's more of just like just trying to push color and see what I can do with color.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, and that's and light obviously has such a great impact on that, and they do set the mood for sure. It changes
Yeah.
and I was just thinking dust furry when you said it.
Oh yeah. I've
Um,
been taking a lot of pictures of the sky lately, so.
that's good. I'm thinking also about the pieces missing you when when they go to their new home.
Oh, I didn't even think. Oh, I haven't. Oh, that. Yeah.
Sorry.
I should send it like postcards.
I'm sure the owners would appreciate that. Um, So, well, we actually are getting to the end of our time. We have some really, a couple of other really good questions, but I know that you are on a schedule because of school. So I'll just read these and we can kind of all together. They look like topiary. Is there any relation to natural forms? They look as if they might grow and need pruning. That is, they look alive. That's great. Thank you, Diana. To me, Julia says, to me, some of your works resemble Nick Cave's sound suits. Is there a correlation?
Oh, yeah.
Kelby says, I love the idea that they were looking at one of your works for 6 months. I think she means the Smithsonian. Yeah, that they should literally. Yeah, let's all stare at them for 6 months. Could your work be at the Renwick Gallery? Probably. Well, yeah, I don't know if it's the American or the Renwick. Those are
I think
both
it might be the Renwick. Yeah.
related. Yeah. And Raymond says he remembers the first time he saw one of your furries. Like, it hit me on a couple of levels: humor, sadness, and he always looks for more. Judy Tavel says it's liminal. Yes. Oh, that liminal. Good word. And do you find your people imbue your pieces with their own story? Probably yes, but I'll leave it to you. And someone just saying it's wonderful. Thank you, which I will also echo. That it's just been, again, I'm so grateful to you for spending your time with us and for talking through this. I love your work on that visceral level, and hearing the stories behind it makes it even more powerful. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the great conversation. And I hope I can get back to Philadelphia one day. We could travel again. And
Yeah.
it's nice
Well,
to see a lot of familiar faces.
when the new building opens, we really, I mean, I'm hoping that in 1 year things are calm health-wise for everyone, and we can all get together and outside in front of the building and take a big giant picture of all our alumni, and
Yeah,
great. It'll be fun.
that sounds great.
Well, thanks again. If anyone wants to kind of just say bye as they're leaving and take yourself off mute and wave. Oh, Raymond's holding up Ceramics Monthly because, oh, this is the ad for our upcoming shows in October. And Raymond
Oh,
just,
cool.
thank you, Raymond. And that must have come in the mail today. It's very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Oh,
Thank you.
bye, everybody. Thanks for spending an hour with us. We appreciate it.
Hi,
Bye.
Jolie.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Jolie.
Thank you very
Tune
much.
into Craft
Linda.
Now
Bye,
tonight.
Linda.